Foresees dragon Jun Longjiu was forcibly awakened from a long slumber. After waking up, she not only had to fulfill her last wish to awaken, but also found out that her dragon pearl had been lost. In order to fulfill her last wish to awaken people and retrieve her lost dragon ball, Longjiu had to leave the empty dragon cave and be forced into the human world. However, the outside world has changed, shocking the dragon. How could humans enter the interstellar age? What shocked Longjiu even more was that the divine realm has also disappeared. Along with the disappearance of the divine realm, there are also her tribe members. Upon waking up, Longjiu, who had become a lonely dragon, had a bewildered expression on her face. Surprisingly, she had become the last real dragon in the era of interstellar space. Seemingly irritable and mysterious, but in reality, it's both skin and milk. The female protagonist of Pai Pai Long is gentle like a flower in the mountains, while the male protagonist of The Crown Prince is crazed and criticized. Keywords of the novel. Long Jun Awakens in the Starry Space without pop-ups, Long Jun Awakens in the Starry Space TXT Complete Collection Download, Long Jun Awakens in the latest chapter of Starry Space reading. Chapter 1 Wedge. Replace me, become me. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Wedge. Replace me, become me. In the dry and dim underground cave, Longjiu could clearly feel that her vitality was rapidly losing. However, she could do nothing and could only weakly lie in the pool of blood, listening to the faint voices coming from outside the cave. Half a month ago, Longjiu followed his teacher and classmates to board a spaceship returning to his home planet Earth for an annual field survey of the planet. However, Longjiu never expected that this on-site gathering and inspection would become her talisman. Longjiu is the only heir of the imperial capital Xinglong family, and his grandfather Long Jihuai is also the commander of the 3 armies of the Xinglua Empire. Therefore, Longjiu had a marriage contract with the Crown Prince Xiao Tingyun from the moment he was born. The good times didn't last long. 15 years ago, the Abyss tribe swept in again, and her parents went on a campaign with the emperor. Her father, in order to protect the emperor on the battlefield, blocked a fatal blow and died as a result. Her mother, on the other hand, stayed in the battlefield and detonated nuclear energy after the army retreated. She died together with the asteroid in the battlefield and 60,000 Abyss soldiers. At that time, Longjiu was only 3 years old. On the night when the battle report returned to the imperial capital Star, Grandpa held her and stood in the yard for a whole night. Then, at the moment when the clouds broke through at dawn, he gently said to her, after drinking, "Just be a carefree young lady. Let Grandpa block the future wind and rain for you." At the age of 3, Longjiu didn't understand what her grandfather meant by these words and how he spoke them to her. However, for the next 15 years, her grandfather did indeed protect her well. Because it was protected too well, it turned dragon wine into a delicate flower in the greenhouse. Innocent yet ignorant. She was peacefully protected by her grandfather for 15 years, until today, when her life was about to end, she found out how much wind and rain her grandfather had sheltered her beyond these carefree 15 years. Dragon wine, you are lucky enough to have a grandfather who takes good care of you. Otherwise, as the only heir of your dragon family and the expected crown princess, you would have died hundreds of times. Hate it. Hate it. If you want to blame it, blame your fate for being too good, and people with too good fate often have too thin a life. How dare you have an engagement with Xiao Qianyun with your identity? If the Crown Prince Xiao Qianyun is His Majesty's son, your engagement with him would be considered a perfect match, but unfortunately, Xiao Qianyun is not His Majesty's son. Your Long family has a marriage relationship with the Crown Prince, how can your Majesty feel at ease? So, all you can do is let you die. Without you, the Long family will have no future. When your grandfather dies, the military power of the 3 armies will naturally return to His Majesty's hands. And as long as you are gone, Xiao Tingyun will also cut off the Long family's support. It is difficult to say whether the crown prince or the second prince will succeed at that time. I probably knew she couldn't live anymore, so the person who killed her didn't hide anything from her. After mocking her, they threw her into this dim cave and silently left. Long Jojo struggled to catch her breath, but couldn't make any sound. She tried to open her personal terminal, but couldn't even move her finger. She could only feel desperately that her body was getting colder and her vision was getting blurry. Hate it. Do you complain? Of course she hates, and of course she complains. She hates her innocence. I also blame my own innocence. But whenever she thought about her grandfather's death, she dared not continue to think about it. 15 years ago, my grandfather held her, who was only 3 years old, and sent her parents away. Now that my grandfather is no longer young, she wants him to experience the sorrow of a white-haired person sending a black-haired person again. And the dragon family, what should the dragon family, who has been guarding the empire for generations, do in the future? Long Jojo is not willing to die like this. She wants to protect her grandfather and also want to protect the Long family. She protects her grandfather, who is no longer young, just like her grandfather and father have protected her for 15 years. She hates, she complains, she is really unwilling to accept it. Dida, drops of blood from my heart fell into the dry land, carrying a strong sense of dragon wine, silently sinking into the ground. But deep underground, something is gradually awakening. The scent of Longjiu wine became weaker and weaker, but the ground she was lying on trembled gently at this moment. In the dimly lit cave, a hoarse and lazy voice suddenly sounded, with a strong drowsiness, as if awakened from a beautiful dream, carrying 3 parts of laziness, 3 parts of drowsiness, and 3 parts of wakefulness. Who is sacrificing to me? Long Jojo's mind was already confused, but upon hearing the sound, she forcefully regained her spirits. She struggled to open her eyes wide, and then saw a shocking and incomprehensible scene that shocked her. In the dim and spacious cave, countless silver starlights appeared, and on a huge stone platform not far away, a mysterious and beautiful creature slowly appeared. Its massive body was coiled on a huge stone platform, emitting fine silver shards throughout. Among the scattered stars around it, the silver scales were like the brightest stars in the Milky Way. As it slowly lifted its head from its coiled body, dragon wine was completely shaken. Dragon. It's not an ugly abyssal dragon, but a real dragon in ancient legends that can only be seen in paintings in interstellar museums today. The silver real dragon slowly opened its eyes. In that pair of silver dragon eyes, it was as brilliant as a Milky Way. It slowly lowered its head and looked down. After its gaze touched the dragon wine lying in the pool of blood, the dragon wine clearly felt that its gaze seemed to pause. Did you sacrifice here to awaken my lord? Little girl, what do you mean by seeking? Dragon wine doesn't know anything about offering sacrifices, but although she is innocent, she is not foolish. She understands the words of this beautiful silver dragon, and it is for some reason that she awakens it. For this reason, she seems to be able to make demands on it. Dragon wine opened its mouth but couldn't make any sound. But Yinlong seemed to know what she was thinking in her heart and spoke again, do you want to live? Long Jojo nodded laboriously. She wanted to live, she wanted to live. Only by living can she protect her grandfather and the dragon family. Yinlong watched her silence for a moment, but her massive body moved and said calmly, you awakened me in exchange for your own blood and soul, and then told me you want to live. Long Jojo was taken aback for a moment. The silver dragon's body shimmered with silver light, and in the dazed gaze of dragon wine, its figure gradually shrank, finally transforming into a red-body-fruit-body girl. The girl fell off the stone platform and approached dragon wine step by step, carefully examining her with her body. She said calmly, change it. I have accepted your offer, but I cannot fulfill your request. However, Longjiu stared blankly at the young girl in front of her, who had transformed from a silver dragon, not because she was too shocked, but because her appearance was 7 points similar to hers. Although their appearance is 7 points similar, their temperament is vastly different. Long Jojo remembered the pause when Yin Long opened his eyes and looked at him. It turned out that the pause was due to his face, which was similar to hers. Long Jojo quietly looked at the person in front of him, his body cold, but the blood inside his body began to boil. The strong unwillingness forced her to lift her head and look seriously at the person in front of her, and she said hoarsely, "Then please replace me and become me, to protect my grandfather and my family for me." Since she was enfeoffed, the Four Seas Dragon King and Dragon 9 have been worshipped by the human race every year. She has received many sacrifices before, but never before has anyone made such a request to her. To replace her and become her. Long Jo's silence made Long Jojo start to feel uneasy. She tried to struggle to get up, but was gently pressed in place by Long Jo's finger. Long Jo. Sure, what is your name as the sacrificial person? Dragon Wine. What is the last wish? Replace me, become me, protect my grandfather, and guard the Haolong family. Once the contract is established, I will temporarily replace you, protect your family, and protect your grandfather until his death. The silver array slowly rose in the dimly lit cave, and Long Jo stood in the center of the array, gazing down at her sacrificial figure with a faint smile, transforming into a cluster of starry dots. Then, with a wave of his hand, Long Jo incorporated all the starlight into his body, except for a pile of clothes left on the ground, indicating that everything that had just happened was true. The little girl named Long Jojo disappeared from this world, not even leaving her soul behind. No one knows that at the moment when Dragon Wine disappeared, in the temporary base a few kilometers away, all the equipment and instruments went on strike, the alarms in the temporary base kept ringing, and the people in the base became a mess. New article Advanced Collection. Come on, make a move anyway, there are quite a few saved manuscripts for Seas Dragon Lord online collection. Collect, follow, and comment to show you our Dragon Claw. Ow, end of this chapter. Chapter 2001. Where is my big Dragon Ball? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2001. Where is my big Dragon Ball? In the temporary base around the mountain, everything became chaotic due to a collective malfunction of all equipment. Qin Ling hurriedly walked out of the office and grabbed a staff member in the hallway. She urgently asked, "Have Xinglan's students returned?" Qin Ling is the first-year director of the Department of Fine Arts at Xinglan College. She is fully responsible for the on-site inspection and wind harvesting on her home planet Earth. There are a total of 7 classes in the first year, each in a group. This morning, she followed the members of the base and their class leaders to go to Huanshan for inspection and wind harvesting. Now all the equipment in the base has malfunctioned, so she cannot contact the team leader over there. She can only hurriedly leave the office to inquire with the staff at the base. On the corridor, the staff member who was suddenly grabbed by Qin Ling was obviously also in charge of this inspection. He saw Qin Ling's anxious expression and smiled to reassure him, "Director Qin, don't worry. Half an hour ago, our team leader had already notified the students to return. The karst cave around the mountain is not close to the base, and it will take more than an hour to come back from there. Please wait a little longer, the student team is already on the way." Upon hearing what he said, Qin Ling breathed a sigh of relief and said helplessly, "It's not that I'm too nervous, but rather that there's the prospective crown princess from the Long family among the students this time. If something happens, not only will it be difficult for the royal family to explain, but we can't even afford to explain it to the Long family. Moreover, there are many crises on the current home planet. More than 5,000 years ago, after humans abandoned their home planet and entered the interstellar space, the Earth gradually recovered after more than 5,000 years of cultivation. However, this recovery started from scratch, and species that disappeared billions of years ago have been conceived again, including prehistoric beasts. Although I know that the area around the mountain has already been cleaned, what if there is an accident?" The staff smiled and continued to reassure, if you really encounter a dinosaur, you're not afraid. This time, the base and the team are protecting 5 mechas, so rest assured. Don't worry. Qin Ling felt relieved too early. After more than 40 minutes, only 6 of the 7 classes that went out for inspection returned, and it happened to be the 3rd class where Longjiu was located that did not return. After asking a question, I found out that Longjiu from class 3 had gone missing. Now all the students in class 3, along with the teacher, have stayed there to search. After learning that Longjiu had gone missing, Qin Ling turned pale and personally took a high-speed car to investigate the surrounding karst cave. Just as a group of people went crazy searching for dragon wine, in the underground cave, Longjiu, who had accepted the dragon wine sacrifice, was almost going crazy. Previously, due to sacrificial offerings and dragon wine, Longjiu did not notice any changes in her dragon cave. When she finally began to inspect her dragon cave, she found that her dragon ball, along with a whole of rare treasures, had disappeared without a trace. Dragon 9 Fury, who dares to sneak into her dragon cave while she is sleeping and empty the treasure she has collected for tens of thousands of years. The treasure in a hole has been emptied, and even her dragon ball dares to be stolen together. Is it because the thief has too much courage, or is her reputation as the Dragon Lord of the Four Seas forgotten, daring to steal even her belongings? Angry Longjiu paced back and forth irritably in the cave, unable to sense where her dragon ball was no matter how much she sensed it. Where's my dragon ball? Where's my big dragon ball? Angry Dragon Lord, going crazy online. With a loud cry, the dragon cave almost collapsed. When Longjiu finally had enough of her madness, she sat cross-legged on the ground and cursed, "Damn thief, don't let me find you, otherwise I will take your whole family to fill the sea." Longjiu, who was swearing and wanting to take the thief's whole family to reclaim the sea, decided not to search alone. Longduo had great power, and she wanted to bring along all the dragons from her clan to help her find the lost dragon ball. However, 1 minute has passed and we can't reach our tribe members. 10 minutes have passed, but we still can't reach our tribe members. Half an hour has passed. Where is the dragon? What about those dragons that she beat up from childhood to adulthood? Where did it go? And her father, the head of the dragon clan. How can't we get in touch anymore? Longjiu gradually felt that something was wrong. Her father and the dragon clan couldn't be contacted. Has the clan been exterminated? Impossible. Longjiu quickly rejected this idea. The dragon clan can exterminate the clan. What a joke is this? But if there is no extermination, why can't we contact each other? Did her father, that terrible old man, finally realize that the human world is no longer fun, so the Ju clan moved to the divine world? But why did you just leave her behind? Is she still not the old man's thoughtful little cotton jacket? Isn't it just that she had a long childhood and slept a little longer? That's why that bad old man didn't even want his own dragon cub. Longjiu held her breath and tried to communicate with the divine realm. Since the old man was not kind, don't blame her for her injustice. When she finds the dragon ball and goes to the divine realm, she must empty the old man's treasure trove. 10 minutes later. Longjiu, who was communicating with the divine realm, surprisingly failed. Longjiu. So what about a larger divine realm? Has it also disappeared? Happy New Year, everyone. Sprinkle flowers and flowers. I said I won't wait long this time. Well, I hee on the first day of 2022, the new article was officially updated. Angry Dragon Lord Online Collection. Collect and comment. Long Jun Jojo will sing for you. End of this chapter. Chapter 3002. Commander-in-Chief of the Three Armies. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3002. Commander-in-Chief of the Three Armies. The divine realm disappeared, and the entire dragon clan disappeared without a trace. Along with the dragon beads and a whole of rare treasures, they were also lost. Longjiu collapsed on the ground, feeling like he had become a useless dragon. In this way, Long Jiusheng lay in the empty dragon cave for a whole day without any love, and finally remembered something else. She accepted the sacrifice of a little girl named Dragon Wine and promised to help her fulfill her last wish. Long Jiu sat up slowly from the ground, glanced at the pile of clothes belonging to Dragon Wine not far away, and then reached out to grab it with a displeased expression. With a jingle, something fell out of the clothes. Long Jiu squinted his eyes and saw that the thing that fell out seemed to be a strange bracelet. There was also a square plate on the chain, which was not big or small. Although it looked strange, the chain was still very beautiful, flashing and sparkling. Dragons, they all like things that twinkle and sparkle. Long Jiu hooked the chain with his fingertips and carefully examined it in his hand. He didn't know what his fingertips had touched, but the square plate actually lit up. What thing? Long Jiu began to study this strange thing seriously with a puzzled expression on his face. This study lasted for 3 days. After Long Jiu finally figured out how to play with this strange thing, there was a commotion outside due to the disappearance of Dragon Wine. The private starship of the Dragon family flew directly to Earth, and the old coach Long Jihuai temporarily requisitioned the Huanshan base with 1,000 Dragon family soldiers. Hundreds of mechas flew out of the base every day, turning the entire Huanshan upside down. However, even so, the missing Dragon Wine was still not found. Half a month has passed, and Long Jihuai has been guarding the base. Even His Majesty the Emperor and His Royal Highness the Crown Prince have sent people to help search for it, but still nothing has been found. Everyone in the base believed in their hearts that the potential Crown Princess of the Long family had encountered an unexpected situation and could not find anyone. Perhaps she had entered the belly of a giant beast, so even if they turned the mountain upside down, they could not find anyone. But Long Laoshuai didn't give up and still sent the Long family army out to search every day. If they couldn't find them around the mountain, they would expand their search scope to see people alive and corpses dead. Half a month later, the people from Xinglan Academy returned to Xuefu Star, and the teams sent by the Emperor to help search also returned to Emperor Capital Star. In the surrounding mountain base, only the people from the base and the personal guards sent by the Dragon family army and the Crown Prince remained. As time goes on, the atmosphere in the surrounding mountain base also decreases. In a small office, Long Jihuai stood silently by the window, looking down at a holographic virtual photo in his hand. In the photo, there was a little girl about 4 or 5 years old, with a cute and chubby appearance. It was obvious that it was Dragon Wine from childhood. The door behind him was gently pushed open, and the butler Chen Bo, who came with the starship, walked in with a freshly brewed cup of ginseng tea. Chen Bo gently advised, "Marshal, drink some ginseng tea and go rest for a while. Miss, good luck has its own blessings, and you will find it." Long Jihuai gently caressed the little girl in the virtual photo with his fingertips. After a moment of silence, he let out a low sigh and said, "Old Chen, do you think I did something wrong?" Chen Bo used to be Long Jihuai's deputy, but he retired more than 40 years ago due to injury. However, he couldn't bear to part with the friendship with the Long family army, so he stayed by Long Jihuai's side. Over the years, he has watched Long Jihuai's children grow up in the Long family, and also watched Long Jiujiu grow up. Chen Bo is an orphan, without parents or children, and in his own heart, he has long regarded the younger generation of the Long family as his own children. When Long Jiujiu's parents died in battle, the deputy officer who had killed countless enemies on the battlefield was so sad that he almost fainted. How could he not understand the grief in by Long Jihuai's heart at that time? Chen Bo gritted his teeth and suppressed his emotions, saying in a deep voice, "You're not wrong. After the incident between the young general and the young lady was your only relative. What's wrong with wanting the young lady to grow up safely and happily? You no longer want the young lady to be exposed to the Dragon family army. Besides, you hope she can grow up carefree and not have to face those bloody storms and deceit, and also because you are giving in. At this point, there was a hint of crimson and hatred in Chen Bo's eyes. He gritted his teeth and continued, "But those people don't understand your concession." Long Jihuai looked out the window in silence. Chen Bo continued in a resentful voice, "After the late emperor had an accident with him, you shouldn't back down. This is not the late emperor now. He wants to rely on the dragon family, but also fears the dragon family. The engagement between the young lady and the crown prince is the thorn in his heart. If the engagement is not terminated, he can't sleep for a day. But why doesn't he think about it? The engagement between the young lady and the crown prince was made by the late emperor back then, and after he ascends to the throne himself, he also dares not withdraw the crown prince personally granted by the late emperor." Before Chen Bo could finish speaking, Long Jihuai turned around and said calmly, "I have never been dissatisfied with the engagement between Wine and the crown prince. Your Highness is the son of Emperor Zhaoxu and the legitimate ruler of the Xinglua Empire. Even if your Highness's situation is delicate now, our Long family will never do anything that betrays our trust and betrays our righteousness." Long Jihuai paused for a moment and sighed deeply, "I just regret it." He lowered his eyes to look at the photo in his hand and his gaze fell on Long Jiujiu's cute and innocent smiling face. "I was proud that I could protect Wine, but I forgot that it's easy to dodge a hidden arrow with a clear gun. If it weren't for my heartache and reluctance back then, Wine could have the ability to protect itself, perhaps today's situation wouldn't have happened. Chen Bo, miss, she." Before Chen Bo could continue to comfort him, there were hurried footsteps coming from the hallway outside the door. "Marshal. I have found the young lady. Dragon. Lying on the ground without getting up. 9. Losing the dragon ball and all the treasures makes me anxious. Does anyone know where the little thief who stole my dragon ball and treasure is? The clue provider can obtain a piece of dragon scales that I have carefully nurtured for tens of thousands of years." End of this chapter. Chapter 4003. It's 9, not Wine. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4003. It's 9, not Wine. I found the young lady under the karst cave around the mountain. The cave is really strange, and all detectors will be disturbed when approaching, so the brothers of the search team have not been able to find the young lady below. The young soldier who came to report the news closely followed Long Jihuai and walked quickly, saying, "The brothers of the search and rescue team had no choice but to put down the slings." Unexpectedly, some blood stains were found below. After screening and comparison, it was found that they matched the Mrs. genes, but the cave was too large. The search and rescue team went down 5 teams before finding the Mississippi. Chen Bo hurriedly asked nervously, "Miss, is she injured?" The young soldier nodded and carefully glanced at Long Jihuai, but did not notice any other emotions on the latter's face before saying, "It should be that she was injured when she fell down. When we found the young lady, she was unconscious by an underground river. We speculate that it was because the young lady fell down and couldn't get up, that she found it herself. There were live fish in the river, and there were some wild fruits growing not far away. The young lady probably relied on these things to persist below for over a month. Now, is Miss awake?" Chen Bo continued to ask. The young soldier shook his head and said, "No, Mrs.'s physical function is too weak. After rescuing her, the search and rescue team directly used the temporary treatment compartment in the mech." As they were speaking, the group of 3 had already left the base and coincidentally encountered a transport mech rushing back from the surrounding mountains. The white treatment chamber was carefully pushed out of the transport mech, and Long Jihuai's expressionless face finally showed other emotions. He quickly approached the treatment chamber and looked at the girl lying in the medicine through the transparent door, with a hint of dampness in his calm and composed eyes. Chen Bo pounced directly onto the treatment room, carefully examining the young girl inside with joy and excitement, saying, "It's okay, it's okay. As long as you come back, the young lady will be safe." The safe, dragon wine is actually not very happy. At that time, she was deliberately found in the Dragon Cave. If it weren't for listening to those noisy guys talking about the Dragon family army and Miss, even if they dug the Dragon Cave upside down, they wouldn't have been able to find her. In order to cooperate with the rescue efforts of those people, Long Jiu even made himself feel a bit embarrassed before finding a place to lie down. She thought these people would take her out once they found her, but they did indeed take her out, but in the blink of an eye, they put her in such a strange-looking box. This strange box looks like a coffin. How can it drip? Is it necessary to deliver her funeral in advance? Long Jiu was unhappy in her heart while lying in the treatment room pretending to be unconscious. Although her eyes were tightly closed, she could still see clearly the people and things outside. As Long Jihuai approached, Long Jiu noticed him because he looked 2 or 3 points similar to the little girl from Longjiu. In other words, he was also somewhat similar to her. Therefore, Long Jiu immediately understood the identity of this old man, who was the grandfather of Longjiu. But Long Jiu was also a bit surprised. The grandfather of Long Jiu didn't actually look old, and he couldn't even tell that he was an old man who had already become a grandfather. After all, in Long Jiu's impression, the people who could become a grandfather were all old men with white skin, but the grandfather of Long Jiu looked at most in his 40s. In fact, Long Jiu did not know that after entering the interstellar age, the average lifespan of humans today has reached around 250 years, and Long Jihuai, who is over 110 years old, is still on the tip of his tail in the middle and old age. Long Jiu, who was pretending to be unconscious, was taken back to the Huanshan base. However, due to the poor medical level in the base, he was taken back to the Long family's private starship that night. The Dragon family took the already replaced Dragon Wine directly back to the Imperial Capital Star in the first galaxy. The word count in the early stage is really difficult to control, either more or less, reluctantly sharing hands. However, this chapter is indeed too few. Let me add another chapter later tonight, Momoda, *3, epsilon *, end of this chapter. Chapter 5004. Is it okay to learn how to fight? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5004. Is it okay to learn how to fight? Imperial Capital Star Dragon Family. In the afternoon backyard, Long Jiu lay crooked like a salted fish on the garden swing, holding up something that had just been replaced and was said to be called a personal terminal. Using the camera function inside, she aimed the camera directly at her own face. She stared at the familiar yet unfamiliar girl in the holographic virtual screen and muttered to herself, "Although we look quite similar, I'm still not used to using your face. How long do you think it will take me to exchange it for my own face?" As she spoke, she extended her finger and lightly tapped the corner of the girl's right eye on the holographic screen. "Actually, I have a small red mole here. Although I have always felt that having such a small red mole here may not look impressive, without it, I am not very pleased. Do you think I will tell everyone later that this mole has grown inexplicably? Will anyone believe it?" Unfortunately, no matter how many times Long Jiu talks to herself like this, no one answers her. After being brought back to the Imperial Capital Star on that day, Long Jiu continued to pretend to be unconscious for 4 or 5 days before slowly pretending to wake up. It's not that Long Jiu has any plans, but that she's really fed up with 3 checks every day. Long Jiu racked her brain to deal with the inspection of those strange instruments. She didn't expect humans to develop so rapidly nowadays. Something as big as a palm gently swept back and forth on her body, making it clear how many bones you had grown. What's even worse is the genetic testing. If it weren't for her understanding some things from the whispers of those doctors and nurses at the time and making some changes in advance, it would have been discovered that her dragon wine had already changed people. Today's humans are too terrifying. Not only are there so many strange instruments, but even those iron monsters called mechs have been made. What other galaxies, starships, and so on are really shocking to Long Jun. The Four Seas Dragon Lord, who had slept for thousands of years before waking up, felt like an old hat for the first time after entering human society. Long Jiu sighed and divided her thoughts, pondering how she could find her lost Dragon Ball among the 6 major galaxies and humans with over 200 inhabited planets. On the same planet, she could still sense where the Dragon Ball was, but across the starry sea, how could she sense it? Do you want her to travel all over 200 planets in the 6 major galaxies? Will dragons be exhausted to death? Long Jiu reluctantly put away his personal terminal and closed his eyes with a desperate expression. But as soon as she closed her eyes, her nose moved gently and she smelled a tingling smell in the air that made her scalp tingle. Miss. Chen Bo walked over with a cup of freshly cooked soup in his hands, smiling like a chrysanthemum. Miss, hurry up and have a drink. This is something that has just been cooked in the kitchen and has been replenished. It was specially sent back by the Grand Marshal from Red Rock Star. Long Jihuai, as the commander of the 3 armies, left the Imperial Capital Star and returned to the Red Rock Star in the 6th galaxy as early as the 3rd day after Long Jiu woke up. Although Red Rock Star is a barren star in the 6th galaxy, it is rich in a ginseng plant called rock ginseng, which looks similar to ginseng but is more nourishing than ginseng. Since Dragon Wine suffered a setback this time, Chen Bo has been activated with a certain hidden attribute, making tonic soup for his young lady to drink. Drinking it 3 times a day has made Long Jiu's face almost the same color as tonic soup. Long Jiu's face turned green when she smelled the nourishing soup smell emanating from the air. She is the Dragon Lord of the 4 seas. She is a dragon. Dragons eat meat. What's the use of drinking soup for her all day? It's better to slaughter a few cows and sheep for her to cook tonic soup in various ways, and swallow them all. She'll keep playing a lively role for them. Chen Bo didn't know what the young lady in front of him was muttering in his heart. He was like an old hen circling around her own offspring, happily handing over a cup of soup and looking at Long Jiu with an expectant expression. Long Jiu. Drink shit, don't drink. Chen Bo earnestly said, drink while it's hot, it's not good when it's cold. Long Jiu, who eats soft instead of hard, said, oh. Watching Long Jiu gulp down a cup of tonic soup, Chen Bo smiled contentedly and said, that's right. Miss, I need to get my body replenished as soon as possible. I'll be back to school when I'm good. School. Long Jiu showed a confused expression. Chen Bo patted his forehead and said regretfully, look at my memory. The doctor said that the young lady hit her head and there was some deviation in her memory, so she doesn't remember many things. As he spoke, he reached out and took the empty small white cup, explaining, because you had an accident this time, the marshal asked for 2 months off from school for you. However, the young lady has just been promoted to freshman year, and it's not good to miss the course. So the marshal said that when the young lady's body recovers, you should go back to school, and there's no need to wait for 2 months. Long Jiu didn't understand what it was in her freshman year, but she understood the word course. In other words, she was going to school. The little girl from Longjiujiu was still a student. Back then, the Dragon Clan also had schools, but they learned how to fight fiercely. She had never seen schools like humans before, so Long Jiu became interested and asked, what do schools teach? Chen Bo was stunned by her question. The young lady doesn't even remember what she learned. What should the young lady do when she returns to school? Long Jiu saw that he didn't respond and impatiently urged, Chen Bo, why aren't you talking? Chen Bo finally snapped out of his senses and explained, Miss, I'm from the Department of Fine Arts in my freshman year at Xinglan College. Of course, what I'm learning is painting. What kind of thing? Long Jiu looked shocked, drawing. What she hates the most is using her dragon claws to hold a pen. No one can make her hold a pen to write, and drawing is not good either. Chen Bo looked at her face and asked cautiously, Miss, don't you like drawing anymore? I like a ball. Long Jiu's vulgar words stuck in her throat, but when she met Chen Bo's cautious gaze, she swallowed them back and asked with difficulty, "Can I change my studies?" Chen Bo didn't think much about it either. After the young lady returned from her injury, she had some memory problems and even changed her personality. However, this was also good. The young lady now is much more lively than before. Chen Bo chuckled and said, "Sure, what does Miss like to learn?" Chen Bo will contact Xinglan College and ask Miss to change her department. Long Jiu thought for a moment and asked sincerely, "Is learning how to fight okay?" Chen Bo. Long Jun Jojo rolled up his sleeves. "I have never lost a fight like this. Back then, I was invincible against the same age dragon of the Dragon Clan." End of this chapter. Chapter 6005. Transfer to Nebula. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6005. Transfer to Nebula. The timid and delicate young lady who has always been timid actually wants to learn how to fight. Chen Bo, who was surprised to see Long Jojo grow up, changed his face. He didn't tell Long Jiu if it was okay, but turned around and contacted Long Jihuai, who was far away on the Red Rock Star. Chen Bo almost cried with a runny nose and tears, saying, "Even if you watch someone argue, young lady would be scared pale. Now that you've been in a difficult situation, you're actually going to learn how to fight." Marshall, I think although young lady doesn't say it, this experience must have left an indelible emotional shadow on her. Do you think we should contact a psychologist to guide young lady? Mississippi. Before Chen Bo finished crying, Long Jihuai in the holographic screen interrupted his crying. Long Jihuai couldn't see any emotion on his face, but he asked with confirmation, "Do you really say that?" "Yeah." Chen Bo quickly nodded and wanted to continue saying something, but saw Long Jihuai raise his hand again to signal him to shut up. After a moment of silence, he said, "You asked Jojo to come and talk to me in person." After Long Jihuai finished speaking, he cut off the communication, leaving Chen Bo with a bewildered expression on his face. But at a loss, Chen Bo still brought this message to Long Jiu. That evening, Long Jiu contacted Long Jihuai. The two of them looked at each other in silence across a distant galaxy and a holographic screen. Until Long Jihuai realized that if he hadn't spoken first, perhaps they would have stared through the holographic screen until dawn tonight. After a moment of silence, Long Jihuai first spoke up and asked, "Why do you want to learn how to fight?" Long Jiu stared at Long Jihuai's calm gaze, with a slight movement in his heart. However, his face remained calm and said, "Isn't it good to learn how to fight? If I had good skills, I wouldn't have had any problems at the Huanshan base back then." Long Jihuai was surprised and asked, "Do you remember what happened that day?" After waking up from the treatment warehouse with dragon wine, no matter what they asked, they were always asking 3 questions without knowing. She also didn't remember what happened in the cave around the mountain that day. Long Jiu lowered her eyes, covering her expression. She imitated the appearance of dragon wine and said, "I vaguely remembered something. I didn't accidentally fall off myself, I was pushed down by someone. After falling, I vaguely heard some words." Long Jihuai frowned and asked, "What words?" "The 2 people who pushed me said, 'Because I am the only heir of the dragon family,'" Long Jiu whispered. This was a fabricated statement by her, but at that time, Long Jojo's appearance was clearly assassinated. He stabbed the center with a knife, indicating that the little girl was lucky and unlucky, and did not die on the spot. Instead, he held on to that breath and completed the sacrifice to awaken the sleeping Long Jiu. But in the past few days when she returned to the Long family, Long Jiu had a simple understanding of some things about the Long family, and it was not difficult to speculate about some things, which is why she made up her mind now. Long Jojo is such a little girl who has no grievances or grudges with others. Who would kill her and for what reason would they kill her? Only the identity of the only heir of the Long family, and her grandfather as the commander of the 3 armies. Although Long Jiu slept for thousands of years, her brain did not rust from sleep. Long Jiu raised her eyes and looked at Long Jihuai on the holographic screen, sniffing and recalling the appearance of Long Jojo before his death. She whispered, I don't want to be protected by you again and know nothing. I also want to protect you and protect the dragon family. This is the last wish of the little girl from Dragon Wine, which she exchanged for her own blood and soul. Long Jihuai's originally expressionless face finally changed. He looked deeply at Long Jiu, but his deep gaze seemed to have gone through Long Jiu and looked elsewhere. Okay. Long Jihuai closed his eyes, and when he looked at Long Jiu again, his gaze showed something more, even his expression softened a bit. But what you need to learn is not fighting. I will transfer you to another school. Transfer. Long Jiu was taken aback. Long Jihuai looked at her gently and said, what you need to learn, Xinglan Academy cannot teach you. Where are you going to learn? Long Jiu frowned, and what else am I going to learn? Long Jihuai smiled faintly and said, go to the Nebula Military Academy. As for what you want to learn, you can find Shen Bo to show you the Academy's introduction book. Military Academy. Long Jiu's eyes were confused, and Long Jihuai gave her a deep glance. Don't think about it, go rest. I'll find Shen Bo tomorrow to get it for you. Oh, Long Jiu agreed with her mouth, but she was still pondering what kind of military academy it was, and said perfunctorily, Grandpa should also rest early. Long Jihuai paused for a moment upon hearing the words, then let out a gentle hum before disconnecting the link. Long Jiu looked at the disappearing holographic screen, then relaxed and lay down on the bed, staring at the starry sky lamp on the ceiling and squinting her eyes slightly. She saw the black pupils in her eyes gradually elongating, eventually turning into a pair of silver vertical pupils. Long Jiu whispered softly, Dragon Wine, your grandfather is much smarter than you. Long Jiu stretched out his dragon claws and tightly pressed his vest. Lying on the trough. Is the grandfather of Dragon Wine so smart? It seems that my little vest cannot be preserved. Long Jihuai. Give you a look and experience it yourself. Long Jojo. No, don't you want face? I must cover my vest tightly. As long as I cover it tightly, no one will want to take it off. End of this chapter. Chapter 7006. Whose fiancé A? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7006. Whose fiancé A? Long Jihuai is not only intelligent, but also has the ability to act swiftly and swiftly. The next day, I completed all the transfer procedures for Long Jiu and directly gave her a spot at the Nebula Military Academy. In the holographic screen, Long Jihuai was dressed in a straight black military uniform, and the star on his shoulder badge was shining. He looked at Long Jiu, who was not seated, and didn't say anything. He just reminded him, although Xingyun can give me an admission spot for my face, if you want to study in Xingyun, you still need to go through the admission assessment. Long Jiu leaned on the sofa, holding a half-eaten apple in his hand. Upon hearing this, he said unhappily, what kind of assessment? Before Long Jihuai could speak, Chen Bo, who was guarding Long Jiu like an old lady, took over and said, let's take the military exam. However, freshmen won't have to take the exam too complicated. At most, it's a strength test and a mental strength test. Long Jihuai glanced lightly at Chen Bo, who looked like an old lady, and then said, and fighting. Fighting. Long Jiu became interested and sat up with a jerk. Fighting, to put it simply, was a fight. She was good at fighting. Which of the dragons in the dragon clan did not get beaten up by her back then? And what is the proudest aspect of the dragon clan in strength testing? Of course, it's the proud power of the dragon clan. As for spiritual power, Long Jiu has also studied in the past few days. The spiritual power that humans nowadays refer to is simply the power of the soul. The stronger the soul, the stronger the spiritual power. Compared to the power of the soul, who has the dragon soul feared? And the reason why humans value mental power so much now is because of the iron knots called mechs, which are said to require mental power to manipulate. Chen Bo saw that Long Jiu had finally become paralyzed and thought she was worried about the assessment. He quickly comforted her and said, "Isn't it just the assessment? Miss, don't worry. You are the heir of the Long family, and you will definitely be able to pass. Later, I will find some fighting teachers for you, on point 1. At this moment, Long Jihuai also spoke up and said, "You have half a month to report to the Nebula in half a month. Half a month may be too tight, but as long as you can pass one item, you can enter the Nebula. That is to say, just pass one of the 3 assessments of strength, mental strength, and combat." Long Jiu nodded thoughtfully, unsure if she had heard Long Jihuai's words. Chen Bo suddenly asked curiously, "If you pass the exam, which department does the young lady want to go to?" When Chen Bo asked this question, Long Jihuai also looked curiously at Long Jiu. Long Jiu let out a sigh and then shook open the introduction book of the Nebula Military Academy that Chen Bo specifically found for her this morning. With a serious expression on his face, he asked, "Which one can make everyone listen to me?" Long Jihuai. Chen Bo Long Jiu asked seriously and attentively, "Which one can I learn to become the commander? Chief?" Long Jihuai Fui, "Learning no one can make you immediately become a commander. Chief. What do you think a commander? Chief is?" Chen Bo also twitched at the corners of his mouth and looked at his young lady inexplicably. "If you want to become the commander. Chief, you can only accumulate military achievements, or..." He quickly glanced at the Grand Marshal on the holographic screen. "Or maybe the Grand Marshal voluntarily steps down and hands over the Long family army to you." Upon hearing this, Long Jiu's eyes lit up and he actually eagerly went to see Long Jihuai. Although Long Jiu didn't say anything, both Long Jihuai and Chen Bo saw from her eyes the meaning of, "Why don't you resign, and why don't I go to any school? You just give me the Long family army." "Don't even think about it," Long Jihuai said angrily. "If you want the Dragon family army, first graduate from Xingyun with the highest score in the school, and then go to the battlefield to win military achievements. I will hand over all the Dragon family army to you. Nebula ranks first in the entire school." Chen Bo thinks that the requirement of being a handsome person is too difficult. You should know that Nebula first is about to graduate. Before Chen Bo could finish his slander, Long Jiu asked seriously, "Did I defeat the current number 1 and not have to wait until graduation?" She then asked again, "Who is the number 1 student in Nebula Academy now?" This emphasis is also too extreme. Chen Bo didn't know if he was surprised by her statement of defeating the current number 1 or something else. He let out a few clicks and said with a subtle expression, "Now the number 1 in the Nebula Academy is the prince, who is about to graduate. Miss, is your fiancé A.E. Long Jiu?" What kind of thing? Now she has heard of the crown prince of the Star Luo Empire, but what kind of ghost is her fiancé A? The little girl from Dragon Wine didn't say she had a damn fiancé A back then. Fiancé A. Long Jiu's face turned green as she stared at Chen Bo incredulously. "Whose is it?" Chen Bo's face turned green, and he looked eagerly at Long Jihuai on the holographic screen, as if the sky had collapsed. "Marshal, take a look, young lady, you have forgotten even the crown prince," he said. Long Jihuai looked deeply at Long Jiu, who had also looked at him. In Long Jiu's incredulous gaze, he slowly said, "Your fiancé A. Long Jiu. Is there still time for her to back out now? Can she continue to sleep and exchange the dragon wine for it?" Long Jojo roared loudly. "I want to sue the little girl from Dragon Wine for deceiving the dragon. At first, she didn't say she still had a fiancé A. I am still a dragon cub, I cannot have a fiancé A. A certain month. It is said that the fiancé A himself is very good. Looking Long Jojo interrupted his roar, suspecting. "Seriously? A certain month? Really, I can't be a male lead if I'm not good. Looking. Long Jojo withdrew her dragon claw and smiled with a reserved smile. I can do it again. A certain month squint. Isn't it a dragon cub anymore? Long Jojo raised her claws and covered her face. What is a dragon cub? As long as it looks good, I have always followed my facial features. End of this chapter. Chapter 8007. If you watch it for a long time, you will get hooked. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8007. If you watch it for a long time, you will get hooked. Obviously, Longzhou's idea is too late. Not to mention that Longzhou was no longer there, even at that time, she could not return the sacrifice of Longzhou. Otherwise, she would not have been forced to wake up from her slumber. It should be noted that Longzhou would have been asleep for thousands of years because she was in her infancy, and she was not fully awakened before her infancy was fully completed. If it weren't for the similarity in appearance between Longzhou and her, Longzhou would have been interrupted and forced to wake up. Even if she had accepted the sacrifice, she would have directly taken action to erase the sacrifice, not to mention responding to the request of the sacrificial person. Once dragons don't make sense, no one can do anything about them. They are so arrogant, let alone the 4 Seas Dragon Lord who has been granted titles. She is a real dragon. But suddenly there was an extra fiancé, and true Dragon Lord said he couldn't afford it. She is good at performing as a performer but not selling herself. She can replace dragon wine and help her protect her grandfather and protect the dragon family. It's okay to help her get married, not good. A mere human race, also wanting to marry the 4 Seas Dragon Lord. Do you have 3 keys for 1 copper coin? Regardless of whether she is suitable or not, Longzhou stared at the introduction book of the Nebula Military Academy for half a day before pointing his finger and deciding, I'll choose this one. Chen Bo and Long Jihuai fixed their eyes at the same time, and Longzhou pointed to the Department of Battlefield Command and Analysis. Looking at this department, Uncle Chen sighed and said, Madame Xiao also graduated from this department back then. She was the most powerful battlefield commander and analyst of that year. Long Jihuai's eyes also showed a hint of nostalgia, but he didn't say anything. He just said, since you've chosen it, let's settle for it. After speaking, he looked at Chen Bo and said, contact someone and send the latest game library to your home. Game warehouse. Long Jiu asked inexplicably, what is that? Long Jihuai explained to her, a holographic battle game called StarCraft was developed in collaboration between the military and game developers. The majority of the players in the game are students from various military academies, and there are also many soldiers from the military playing in it. This all-in-point-1 game allows students and soldiers to experience the battlefield and learn from each other. After finishing speaking, he said to Chen Bo again, let's open the underground training room at home and let the liquor adapt first. Long Jihuai paused for a moment before asking Longzhou, how many fighting teachers do you need? Longzhou waved his hand indifferently and said, no need, I'll practice it myself. Just get that game library as soon as possible. Upon hearing that she didn't even need a fighting teacher, Chen Bo thought to himself, but before he could speak, he heard Long Jihuai say, okay, but the teacher doesn't need it, but you can try going to the gravity chamber first. Long Jiu looked up at him. Before she could ask what a gravity chamber was, Long Jihuai had already started explaining to her, a gravity chamber can exercise your stress resistance, as well as train your strength and reflexes. As for how much gravity you can bear, let's do it. Now Long Jiu understood and nodded thoughtfully, okay, I'll go give it a try now. She also wants to know how powerful humans have become nowadays, and how much their so-called strongest gravitational energy is. Moreover, when she was at the Huanshan base, she wanted to try with that iron knot called mecha, but she didn't know how many punches that iron knot could withstand. Long Jiu is also a quick and decisive person. Just after discussing with Long Jihuai, he turned around and went to the underground training room. Chen Bo, like an old hen guarding her cubs, chased after her while muttering, "The gravity chamber is not for fun, young lady. You should take it easy. At the beginning, open the lowest one and stay inside for a few minutes before coming out immediately." The underground of the Dragon family mansion has been transformed into a training room. While giving detailed instructions, Chen Bo opened the door of the gravity room with Long Jiu. "The console is inside. If you can't bear it, young lady, just press here to stop immediately." Chen Bo stood in front of the console and introduced Long Jiu. "The red button is the start button, the blue button is the close button, and the green button is for increasing weight, and the yellow button is for reducing gravity. Don't confuse it, young lady." Chen Bo recited in fragments all the way, but was impatiently kicked out by Long Jiu. Watching Long Jiu close and lock the door of the gravity chamber, Chen Bo began to worry again. While he was worried, he dialed Long Jihuai's call. As he watched De Shuai appear again on the holographic screen, he couldn't help but nag, "De Shuai, may I be too presumptuous? The young lady has never been involved in training before, what if?" Before Chen Bo could finish nagging, Long Jihuai interrupted directly, "Did she go in?" "Ong." Chen Bo nodded. Long Jihuai said, "Turn on the monitoring of the gravity chamber, and I will immediately connect it on my end." Chen Bo blinked and watched as the holographic screen disappeared again, reluctantly turning on the surveillance of the gravity chamber. As soon as the surveillance was turned on, Long Jihuai, who was far away from the Red Rock Star, immediately connected in. In the office of the Grand Marshal at the Red Rock military base, a holographic screen about half a meter long appeared, inside which was Long Jiu from the gravity chamber. At this moment, Long Jiu from the gravity chamber was still studying the control console, but 2 minutes later, she seemed to have finished studying and pressed the start button with a snap. Then, Long Jihuai was stunned as he watched Long Jiu slap and slap like a hamster, hitting gravity to its maximum all the way. Long Jihuai's heart was also startled by Long Jiu's fierce and tiger-like operation, causing it to soar to 108. Long Jihuai was racing his heart and quickly pondering, what is the highest gravity in his gravity chamber? A few seconds later, the conclusion was drawn that General Long, the commanding commander of the 3 armies, had a paralyzed face. 30 times the gravity, even A-class mechs will experience compression deformation under such gravity. However, he looked at Long Jiu in the holographic screen, his mouth twitched slightly, and clearly saw her muttering 2 words from Long Jiu's relaxed and comfortable face. "That's it." The words this, not to mention the mockery from Long Jiu at 30 times the gravity, Long Jihuai also felt it. He raised his hand and wiped his face, then glanced at Long Jiu on the holographic screen. Not only was he relaxed and comfortable, but he also started punching inside. Don't say it, it looks pretty, but it's a bit addictive after watching it for a long time. Long Deshuai slammed off the holographic screen and didn't want to take another look. Now Long Jiu, with a contemptuous expression on her face. "Do only humans want to marry me? Are you compatible?" Long Jiu of the future, slapping her face. "How fragrant." End of this chapter. Chapter 9008. Let me take a break. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9008. Let me take a break. Long Jiu only spent one night playing with everything in the training room and never went there again. Until the new game warehouse was sent to the Dragon family. This thing is an extremely fresh toy for Long Jiu. After studying how to play it, she couldn't wait to lie down in the game compartment. Once the neuron was connected, Long Jiu first felt as if her soul was being pulled away by something, and then that's all for now. Sparks lit up in the game cabin, and smoke began to rise inside. Chen Bo, who was guarding outside, opened the warehouse door in a cold sweat before leaving. When Long Jiu was bounced out of the game warehouse, her face was full of confusion. Chen Bo was also confused. After carefully checking that the young lady was not injured, he looked at the scrapped game compartment and wondered, it shouldn't be. This is the latest game compartment, how could the quality be so poor? However, what the bewildered Long Jio and Chen Bo didn't know was that while Long Jio's game compartment began to emit sparks and smoke, all Interstellar players of the Starry Sea battle game were forcibly ejected from the game. The game crashed. 2 minutes after the game crashed, the Interstellar network erupted, filled with players of this game in the military's research and development room and collaborating game merchants. Can't we upgrade the system in the R&D room? I just got stuck in battle mode and now it's been 5 minutes. I can't even enter. Those who are also stuck will be beaten when the game development team comes out. The collapse was quite severe this time. My friends and I were both stuck. Let me first explain that I am on the KS star in the 3rd galaxy, and my friends are on the Blue Ocean star in the 2nd galaxy. I am stuck in the 3rd galaxy's Shuefu star. The 5th galaxy's Venus has also been stuck out. The 6th galaxy. The 1st galaxy, the interstellar internet, was in chaos, and everyone was shocked to find that it was all players from all over the planet who were stuck out of the game this time. More than 20 minutes later, the announcement from the game development team slowly climbed up, but the explanation given was that the game was overloaded. For a moment, the game development team was directly criticized for being on the hot search list on the Interstellar network, while the real culprit stayed quietly at the Long family, enjoying Chen Bo's surprise dessert while watching Chen Bo make a holographic video for Long Jihuai, and angrily accused the game warehouse manufacturer and game development team. Long Jihuai silently listened to Chen Bo's angry accusation while using his personal terminal to quickly browse the hot topics on the Interstellar network. After finishing the browsing, Chen Bo also paused his accusation of drinking water gurgling. After a moment of silence, Long Jihuai asked, "Did the game compartment malfunction as soon as I logged into it?" Chen Bo raised his voice in confusion and said, "Yes. It's so dangerous, it's all smoking." If it weren't for my quick reaction, Long Jihuai interrupted him and asked, "And then the game collapsed all over the universe?" "It seems like this," said Chen Bo with a slow and raised voice. Long Jihuai looked faintly at Long Jiu, who was enjoying a small dessert, and suggested, "Do you want to go to the underground training room to test your mental strength?" Chen Bo looked bewildered and didn't understand what Deshuai meant by these words. But Long Jiu understood and looked up at Long Jibua, blinking and saying, "Okay." "Long Jihuai. Do you know where the mental health monitor is?" Long Jiu stood up and walked towards the basement, saying, "I know, I've seen it below before and learned how to use it." Long Jihuai didn't say anything more, he just silently remotely opened the surveillance in the testing room at home. Chen Bo was still confused. He looked at Long Jiu walking to the basement in confusion, and then looked at the handsome man in the holographic screen in confusion. He said, "No, the game warehouse burned down, and the game also collapsed. Is it related to the young lady going to test her mental strength?" Long Jihuai did not answer, but silently said in his heart, "Probably. The game developer said that the game is overloaded." What is overload? The meaning is that at the moment when his family entered the game's endurance exceeded. And what entered the game? It is consciousness, also known as spiritual power. Long Jihuai's expression became increasingly strange as he thought of being able to destroy the psychic power of interstellar games. When Long Jiu went to the testing room, Long Jihuai helplessly saw from the holographic screen that as soon as the testing instrument was connected, there was a bang of smoke and sparks. He slowly raised his hand and wiped his face again. Long Deshuai felt like he was getting a little overwhelmed again. This time, not only did the marshal feel overwhelmed, but the scene also went crazy. Chen Bo looked at the scrap detector and recalled the scrapped game compartment before, with a skeptical expression on his face. So the marshal asked the young lady to test her mental strength because the person who broke the all-star game was the young lady. Now even the mental health monitor at home has been scrapped. How strong must the young lady's spiritual power be in order to disable a detection device after destroying a game compartment and crashing an interstellar game? Chen Bo looked at the holographic screen with a dull and handsome face, then at the obedient and innocent young lady sitting there. He leaned against the wall with one hand and his forehead with the other, murmuring, "Wait a moment, let me slow down. I'm a bit dizzy now." Regardless of whether Chen Bo is still on top or not, Long Jihui has already been on top. He looked at Long Jiu with an innocent face and said indescribably, "When you report to the Nebula, please keep it." Long Jiu. Okay. Long Jihuai's mouth twitched as she snapped and disconnected the video call. In the next 10 days or so, Chen Bo and Long Jihui never mentioned providing a new game warehouse for Long Jiu, nor urged her to go to the underground training room. So, after being paralyzed at home for 10 days, Long Jiu boarded the starship to the third star system, Xuefu Star, with Chen Buqin himself. Long Jiu should report to the Nebula Military Academy. Long Jiu wags her tail and claps her claws. Do you want to experience the feeling of being on your head? Then let's take a look at me, my lord. End of this chapter. Chapter 10-009. Is the future crown princess a little crying bag? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10-009. Is the future crown princess a little crying bag? The Xuefu star in the third galaxy is a planet that gathers all high-end universities in the entire interstellar space. Not only is the Nebula Military Academy here, but even the Xinglan Academy where Dragon Wine was originally located is on this planet. The Nebula Military Academy counts as one semester per year and starts in March each year. It's already September now, and it can be said that more than half of the semester has passed. As a transfer student, Long Jiu can be considered the latest one in history. Of course, the prerequisite is that Long Jiu, a transfer student, can successfully pass the entrance examination, in order for her to become the latest transfer student since the establishment of the Nebula Military Academy. Xuefu Star has 30.6 hours a day, and 10 months of the year belong to spring and summer. As soon as October passes, it immediately enters a cold winter without any transition. So every time after the end of October, people on Xuefu Star will fall asleep in summer, and when they wake up, it will be snowing outside. Therefore, those who have just arrived on Xuefu Star will always catch a cold in their first year. November is the busiest time for hospitals on Xuefu Star, and it is also a high outbreak period for first-year students in various colleges to fall ill. But during this period of high incidence of illness, it does not include the Nebula Military Academy. The students of the Nebula Military Academy are all reserve soldiers of various imperial armies, without a good physique. How can they become warriors? The first requirement for students at the Nebula Military Academy is to have a strong physique. And this time there will be a transfer student in the first grade, and it is said that he is still a transfer student from Xinglan College. This news has made the entire students of Xingyan College boil. What kind of college is Xinglan College? That's a famous art school, where all the students are dancing and singing, as well as art students in painting, film and television. Those weak chickens that compete with chicks and can be blown down by the wind actually turn into the nebula. Isn't this a joke? Therefore, transfer student Long Jiu, who has not yet arrived, has already become famous in the nebula. Few students from Xingyan know who this transfer student is, nor do they know if he is male or female, but they know that the transfer student will undergo an admission assessment today. The students of Nebula, who have nothing to do, opened a gambling table on the school website forum. 2,000 students from the whole school participated in the gambling, and more than 1,800 of the 2,000 students bet that this new transfer student would cry and fail the assessment, because military students are not as easy to pass as art students. But there are also over 100 people who bet that they can pass the exam, the reason being that although they are art students, they are not fools. Will they not know how difficult it is for Nebula to enter the school assessment? Since they dare to come, it indicates that they have that confidence. The reason sounds reasonable, but the odds are vastly different. The probability of failing the exam is 1.10, while the probability of passing the exam is 1.1000. This is because the opening person wants to give the transfer student some face, otherwise he will directly change the probability of passing the exam to 1.100000. The gambling table on the school website forum is going on in full swing, and in a separate studio for the 4th year of the college's mecha department, Shen Qiao is scrolling through the school website forum while using his corner of his eye to look at the person sitting on the windowsill, looking down to read. He jokingly asks, "Your Highness, I have heard that this transfer student who is causing a great uproar throughout the school is your prospective crown princess. Now that the gambling table is open on the school website forum, won't you, as fiancé A, say anything?" Xiao Tingyun stared intently at the book in his hand, and upon hearing the words, he only let out a gentle hum without looking up, saying, "What do you mean?" Shen Qiao became energized and propped up his hands on the operating table, looking at Xiao Tingyun curiously and asking, "Tell me about the potential crown princess. Don't you want to know if she can pass the exam?" But what did Long Lao Shui think? How could she suddenly transfer the potential crown princess from Xinglan to Xinyan? Didn't she have an accident on her mother planet not long ago? Did someone in Xinglan do it? The old Shui was afraid that his granddaughter would continue to stay in Xinglan and cause trouble, so he decided to transfer her to Xinyan. After all, you are in Xinyan. As a fiancé A, can you still not protect some of your fiancé AES? Xiao Tingyun seemed to have heard something funny and finally lifted his head from the book, with a smile on his lips. If the marshal really wants to protect her, he will make up his mind not to send her to Xinyan. Why? Shen Qiao was taken aback. Xiao Tingyun closed the book in his hand and jumped off the windowsill. The sunlight behind him made his figure even more handsome and slender. "Because I'm here," Xiao Tingyun said meaningfully, "and some people are determined not to see this." Shen Qiao reacted and frowned, wondering, what does that dragon old handsome mean? Xiao Tingyun was also puzzled. What exactly was Long Jihui doing when he suddenly transferred his granddaughter to Xinyan? Seeing the same confusion in Xiao Tingyun's eyes, Shen Qiao suddenly chuckled and said, "No matter what the old handsome thinks, I want to know one thing." Xiao Tingyun glanced at him sideways, his eyebrows slightly raised. Shen Qiao chuckled and asked, "What do you mean to that prospective crown princess?" Xiao Tingyun squinted his eyes and recalled that the last time he saw dragon wine was 15 years ago. At that time, he was 7 years old, while Longjiu was only 3 years old. And at that time, his father died, and her parents also died in battle on the front line. That was the first time Xiao Qianyun saw dragon wine, and also the last time, in the palace, at his father's funeral. Not long after that, his mother also Xiao Tingyun stopped his memories and looked at Shen Qiao, who was eagerly waiting. He snorted and said, "It's a little crying bag." Shen Qiao. "Ha! Little crying bag. What does this mean?" "It's not very interesting." Xiao Tingyun threw the book back into the control panel and walked towards the door. "Let's go." Shen Qiao quickly closed his personal terminal and chased after him. "Where are you going?" Xiao Tingyun said, "Go to the cafeteria." "It's time, didn't you notice?" Shen Qiao said, "It's just right. After finishing the cafeteria, you can stop by the assessment room and take a look. I'm looking forward to the performance of the crown princess. She's the only heir of the Long family." Long Jojo lifted her dragon claw and looked unfriendly. "I heard that this gentleman is a little crying bag. Who is spreading rumors? Stand up for yourself, I won't kill you." End of this chapter.